The loudest man in the room is usually being carried by weaker men who cannot stand without him, not protected by him, carried. And every one of those weaker men has been trained to call that carrying loyalty, brotherhood, strength, anything except what it actually is: worship. Weak men worship loud fools the way frightened villagers worship a storm. Not because the storm is wise, because the storm is loud enough to drown out the sound of their own trembling. A weak man hears volume and mistakes it for certainty. He sees swagger and mistakes it for rank. He watches a fool interrupt, posture, dominate a room with the social delicacy of a drunk ox in a glass chapel, and something in his chest relaxes. Not because the fool is impressive, because the fool is performing a fantasy the weak man cannot perform for himself. The fool is lending him a nervous system, and rented nervous systems always come with interest. Stay with this. By the end, the architecture of every loud fool a man has ever obeyed will be visible in detail, along with diagnostic tools the system profits quietly from keeping hidden. People love to say, fools rise because the world is unfair, because the algorithm is broken, because intelligent men are too quiet. All of that is partially true. All of it is incomplete. Loud fools do not rise on their own. They are lifted, endorsed, defended, excused, amplified, fed. A loud fool is a man-shaped speaker, and a speaker is worthless without a room full of men willing to plug it in. Weak men plug it in, and they do it with astonishing speed. Picture an intelligent man standing in a room where a loud fool has just spoken with total confidence about a subject he barely understands. The fool is wrong in 6 directions at once, contradicts himself twice in the same breath, performs certainty like a street magician who learned one trick and built a religion around it. And still the weaker men in the room nod, lean in, laugh too hard, echo too early. Their posture shifts. Their principles become negotiable. The half-formed sentence that was about to correct him dies in the back of their throats. Not because the fool won an argument, because the fool offered them something they wanted more than truth. Permission to stop thinking. A strong man feels friction around a loud fool. A weak man feels relief. That difference is the entire architecture. Niccolò Machiavelli, writing in a prison cell after Florence had been ruined by exactly this kind of theater, observed something that modern men still pretend not to understand. In The Prince, he wrote that men in general judge more by their eyes than by their hands, because everyone can see, but few can feel. Sight is cheap, touch is expensive. A loud fool is pure visibility. Nothing in his substance survives a single honest touch test. That is the first proprietary term, theater rank. Theater rank is the counterfeit hierarchy that appears when performance outruns substance. It is the social hallucination that forms when men begin treating visibility as value, aggression as authority, shamelessness as competence. The loud fool rises inside theater rank because weak men are easier to organize through spectacle than truth. Truth asks them to judge. Spectacle only asks them to applaud. Weak men prefer applause. They will never call it that, of course. They will call it alignment, brotherhood, energy. Finally, someone said it. Weak men love that phrase almost as much as they love the fool who invented its latest version. Finally, someone said it, as if saying a stupid thing loudly deserves ceremonial reverence because the room was too sane to say it first. There is always that moment. A fool says something crude, oversized, wrong, but forceful. The room goes still for half a second. The competent are calculating whether the stupidity is worth cleaning up. The weak are calculating whether it is safe to join. Then one weak man laughs, another repeats it, a third invents a cheaper version. Within 20 seconds, cowardice has formed a coalition. Within a week, that coalition will call itself a movement. Within a year, it will call itself the truth. And here is the real horror, the part that sits underneath the absurdity. The men in the coalition were not converted. They were released. The fool did not persuade them. He unlocked them. He gave them a warrant to express a weakness they had been privately carrying for years, cruelty they could not justify, arrogance they could not perform alone, contempt they had been rehearsing in private mirrors. The fool arrives with the one thing every coward secretly wants: a shared ceiling of shame. When shame has a shared ceiling, a weak man can finally stretch without his head touching it. A man who has been in one of these rooms will recognize something specific: the peculiar, almost chemical relief in the weak followers' faces, the way their eyes half close when the fool speaks, the way they repeat his phrases with the reverence of a man reciting scripture over a meal he did not cook. It is not agreement. It is not even loyalty. It is worship. And worship has a mechanism, which brings us to the second term: borrowed backbone. Borrowed backbone is what weak men use when they stand near a loud fool and begin feeling temporarily brave. They are not braver, they are rented. They are using another man's volume the way a child uses a costume sword. The blade is cardboard, the thrill is real, and because the thrill is real, they confuse the borrowed feeling with an upgrade in character. It never is. Watch the same men away from the fool. The shoulders drop, the speech softens, the principles quietly return, the aggression evaporates. Their courage has the battery life of a cheap torch bought at a petrol station at midnight. 1 hour of brilliance, then darkness, then the embarrassing rattle of a man shaking a dead thing and pretending it still works. A woman with functional pattern recognition sees this within minutes. That matters because she often reads the architecture faster than any man inside it. She notices which man in the room generates force and which men merely vibrate when they stand too close to it. She notices who becomes louder only when supported by a louder man. She notices who insults the absent but smiles at the present. She notices who speaks with conviction and who speaks with backup. An intelligent woman can expose 6 layers of counterfeit masculinity in under 3 seconds with one quiet, assessing glance. And the weak man hates that more than almost anything, because one clean female read can undo a decade of borrowed posture. That hatred is rarely admitted. It comes out as contempt for women, or jokes about female intuition, or the tired line that women always choose the wrong men. No. Women often see the right thing at extraordinary speed. It is weak men who lie about what they are seeing, because the truth forces them to admit that the man they worship is not a king but a rented nervous system in Renaissance clothing. Sit with that for a second. History has made this mistake before, and it has paid for it in cities, not feelings. Athens, 415 BC. A man walks into the assembly with the confidence of a god and the judgment of a drunk gambler. Alcibiades. Beautiful, brilliant, catastrophically loud. Plutarch recorded the way Athenian men followed him, not because his arguments were strong, but because his presence was intoxicating. He seemed to sweep them along against every cautious voice around him. Alcibiades stood in the assembly and argued for an enormous invasion of Sicily. The older, competent generals warned against it. They explained the distances, the costs, the logistics. They were correct in every detail. And the Athenians voted for Alcibiades anyway, because Alcibiades made them feel large, and the old men made them feel small. The Sicilian expedition was the greatest military disaster in Greek history. Thousands of Athenian men died on a beach, in a quarry, in chains. Alcibiades did not even lead the doomed campaign to its end. He defected. Twice. The weak men of Athens had worshipped a man so shamelessly theatrical that he could change sides 3 times in one war and still find audiences who confused charisma for vision. Thucydides, watching his own city ruin itself, wrote something that should be carved into every male bone in the Western world. Athens fell not because her enemies were stronger, but because her citizens preferred leaders who flattered their appetites to leaders who named their limits. That sentence is 2,400 years old. It is also a description of every corporate meeting, every friendship group, every comment section, every rally, every family dinner, dominated by the loudest personality in the room. The disease did not change. Only the costumes changed, and the men who cannot see it are currently auditioning for parts in the tragedy. Machiavelli would have told the Athenians the same thing if they had listened. In The Prince, he wrote, "With the weariness of a man who had watched this pattern consume 3 republics, that the prince who relies on the goodwill of the inconstant multitude builds his palace on sand. The crowd will love him for an hour and sell him for a coin. Loud fools never survive their own followers. The choir that raises them is the same choir that sings at their funeral. A weak man does not know that. A strong man has smelled it." Now, the reframe. An intelligent man who has lived through this will recognize the next part without being told. The fool is rarely alone. He always travels with a choir. Not a choir of the competent men do not need noise to feel tall. He travels with men whose identities are held together entirely by borrowed thunder. Men who clap hardest at lines that should have embarrassed them. Men who call humiliation banter when the fool does it to someone else, and call it disrespect when it comes back around. Men who mistake shamelessness for freedom because they have never done the silent, expensive work required for real freedom. Weakness is not always timid. Sometimes weakness wears a grin, pounds the table, talks over everyone, quotes half-read books, mispronounces Nietzsche, calls itself alpha with the confidence of a pigeon on a chessboard, and knocks the pieces over while the other pigeons cheer. The only reason the room does not laugh is because the other pigeons have already declared this pigeon a strategist. That should be funny. It is also the operating system of most hierarchies a modern man will pass through in his lifetime. There is a third name for what weak men buy from fools: the market for permission. The market for permission is the hidden economy where weak men go to purchase emotions they cannot generate internally. Permission to dominate, permission to stop doubting, permission to be crude and call it courage, permission to obey and call it loyalty, permission to hate and call it strategy, permission to give up and call it realism. Loud fools run this market at scale. They sell pre-packaged permission to men who never built a self strong enough to authorize itself. A sovereign man does not need to buy permission. A weak man subscribes monthly, sometimes hourly, and calls the subscription manhood. Baltasar Gracian, the 17th century Jesuit who wrote what is arguably the darkest practical handbook ever published by a priest, The Art of Worldly Wisdom, warned about exactly this kind of commerce. In aphorism 150, he said, "It is safer to reach the port of reputation through the straits of merit than through the open sea of favor. Favor is cheap. Favor is granted by fools to fools. Merit is the expensive route, quieter, slower, less decorated. Most men will never take it because the market for permission offers them something merit never can: immediate inclusion without the work of becoming inclusion-worthy." Let that land. And because the market for permission is a market, the fool inside it is not dangerous because he is exceptional. He is dangerous because he is a node. He aggregates other men's weakness and converts it into a force. That force then does things, wrecks companies, ruins marriages, flips elections, enshrines mediocrity, elevates cruelty, crushes the competent. The fool is the symptom. The appetite is the disease. Treat the fool and another arrives within a season. Treat the appetite and something changes permanently. That is the only cure worth earning. Now, a second historical scene. Lower volume, higher precision. London, 1623. A young man of breathtaking beauty and almost no substance has attached himself to two successive kings of England. His name is George Villiers. His title, eventually, is Duke of Buckingham. He is loud, flamboyant, magnetic in a way that competent courtiers find nauseating. King James I calls him Sweet Steenie in letters that embarrass the realm. King Charles I entrusts the kingdom to him with the devotion of a drowning man grabbing a gilded statue. Buckingham leads disastrous military expeditions to Cadiz and the Ile de Ré that return in ruin. The English treasury bleeds. Parliament rages. Competent men write memos nobody reads. And both kings continue to worship him because Buckingham is the only man whose presence makes their insecurity feel temporarily cured. He is eventually assassinated by a low-ranking officer named John Felton, who, when asked why he did it, said only that he had read Parliament's complaints and decided someone had to do something. The court wept, the nation celebrated, and the competent men in the shadows finally exhaled until the next loud favorite arrived to fill the same gap in the same king's nervous system. Buckingham was not strong. He was merely loud in a room of weak men who needed him to be strong on their behalf. The moment one man with a clear eye looked at the machinery, the spell broke. But the spell only broke for Felton. Everyone else kept worshipping the next man who showed up in the same empty costume. A man with any historical memory will feel the mirror swing toward him here. Because the deeper question is not why fools rise. The deeper question is why, in almost every male life, there is a period, sometimes a decade, when the man himself was part of the choir. When he laughed too hard at someone else's cruelty. When he went quiet while a louder man bullied a quieter man. When he repeated a phrase he did not believe because belief was less important than belonging. That is the mirror flip. And it is not an accusation. It is diagnostic. A man can spend years despising loud fools while privately carrying an addiction to their methods. He can reject the clown in public and fantasize about becoming him in private, in moments of resentment, when the competent route feels too slow and the theatrical route looks like a cheat code. He can hate performance while secretly rehearsing his own. He can call others shallow while feeling his chest tighten when a shameless man takes a room with no visible moral cost. That tightening is not guilt, it is recognition. Because most men were programmed by a culture that taught them two contradictory lies at once. The first lie said decency would automatically command respect. The second said shamelessness was the fastest route to power. Men raised inside both lies become split. One half wants dignity, the other half envies theater. One half wants to be real, the other half wants the cheat code. That internal split is what loud fools feed on. They are walking cheat codes. Or rather, they look like cheat codes right up until the long-term consequences arrive, dressed as divorce, disgrace, collapse, isolation, and a room full of men who only know how to clap, never how to stand. Friedrich Nietzsche, in Thus Spoke Zarathustra, described this exact kind of man, what he called the last man. The last man wants comfort over greatness, consensus over truth, stimulation over meaning. "We have invented happiness," says the last man, and he blinks. That blink is the single most chilling image in modern philosophy, because the blink is not peace. The blink is the small, contented closing of an eye that has decided it does not want to see anymore. Loud fools are priests of the blinking last man. They offer ready-made enemies, ready-made opinions, ready-made swagger. They deliver pre-chewed masculinity to men who were never taught to hunt their own. And the last man worships them, because the last man's primary terror is the silence in which he would have to become someone on his own. This is the channel where that silence gets a vocabulary. Every video peels another costume off the machinery that trained men to confuse noise with rank. Subscribe or walk back into the choir. Those are the only two doors in this corridor. A man who does not sharpen the eye watches it go quietly back to sleep. Type one word in the comments. Choir. If a man has watched weak men assemble around a fool and pretend it was brotherhood. Rented if borrowed backbone just named something he has witnessed or suffered. Theater if he has seen performance mistaken for rank in a room that should have known better. Split if the mirror flip landed and he recognized the installed envy as well as the installed disgust. The word a man refuses to type is usually the word that still owns him. And now the weapon forge, because naming the wound without handing the blade is elegant despair, and elegant despair has never saved a man from the next clown with a microphone. The first weapon, separate force from display. When a man enters a room, ask one question before any other. Does he generate order, or does he merely generate reaction? Loud fools generate reaction. Real force generates order. Reaction is cheap. A toddler with a hammer can produce it. Order requires hierarchy inside the self. A man who generates order will quieten a room without raising his voice. A man who only generates reaction has to escalate forever to keep the same attention. The second weapon, never grant theater rank, because a man is shameless. Shamelessness is not proof of freedom. Very often it is proof that conscience, reflection, and proportion have been evicted from the building. Some men look unbothered because they transcended social pressure. Others look unbothered because they are too underdeveloped to register shame. One is formidable. The other is a fire hazard in a tailored suit. The third weapon, study the followers before the leader. If a loud man is surrounded by men who become dumber in his presence, more dependent, more performative, more eager to echo than to think, nothing strong is happening in that room. That is an ecosystem of organized weakness, with a mascot at the front. Real leaders leave men sharper. False leaders leave men hungrier. The fourth weapon, watch what happens when contradiction enters. A strong man absorbs friction without theatrics. A loud fool treats contradiction as assassination. Weak followers treat it the same way because they have merged their borrowed identity with his performance. The moment one calm dissenting sentence makes an entire group tense, a man is not in the presence of authority, he is in the presence of a cult with cheaper furniture. The fifth weapon, respect the woman thread instead of resenting it. An observant woman often reads counterfeit status with unnerving speed. She notices when the loud man scans the room for effect after every sentence. She notices when his dominance requires an audience. She notices when his confidence evaporates in private stillness because it was social fuel all along. Men who feel threatened by female pattern recognition are usually men whose patterns have recently been recognized. The sixth weapon, the silent exit. A man who wants to exit a choir does not argue with it. He simply stops harmonizing. He lets the silence become the correction. Argument gives the fool oxygen. Silence starves him. The moment a man stops echoing, he stops being a resource, and a fool who is not being fed reveals his actual size within weeks. The silent exit is the only move the choir cannot metabolize. And now, the last and coldest diagnostic, the one that separates the men who will change from the men who will nod at this video and do nothing by Friday. A man who wants to stop worshipping loud fools has to stop needing an audience to feel substantial. That is the real surgery. Otherwise, he will oscillate forever between resentment of the fool and attraction to the fool's methods. He will criticize theater by day and rehearse his own by night. He will despise external noise while quietly cultivating internal noise. And a man in that condition is easy prey, because the fool outside him keeps shaking hands with the fool inside him, and the handshake is warm, and the weak part of him keeps extending its palm. The cure is not passivity. Passivity is how the competent become privately correct and publicly irrelevant. The cure is earned weight. Earned weight is what a man has when his words are backed by structure, his aggression is under command, his standards survive social pressure, and his silence is not emptiness but reserve. Earned weight does not require spectacle to be felt. In fact, spectacle weakens it. The heaviest men in any room move as if they have nothing to prove because they do not. A fool cannot tolerate that kind of man. Weak men cannot imitate him. They can only orbit him, misunderstand him, or if they are very lucky and very honest, learn from him. Seneca, writing to his friend Lucilius while serving as chief advisor to the Emperor Nero, a madman who eventually ordered Seneca's suicide, warned about crowds with a weariness that only a man trapped inside theater can. Right. He said, whenever you wish to know what to avoid, look at what the crowd runs toward. The crowd and the loud man always meet at the same coordinates. A man who wants to find sanity often needs only to walk in the opposite direction from whatever is currently being cheered. That is harder than it sounds, because the room will hate him for walking away. The choir will call him bitter, arrogant, cold, disloyal, jealous, anything except the accurate word, which is sober. A sober man in a drunk room is always accused of being the problem. He is not the problem, he is the disruption. And disruption is the only form of love a sober man can offer to a room that has confused volume for life. There is a previous video on this channel, Every Man Has a Price. The weak just sell cheaper, that named the economics underneath this entire system. It showed how weak men pre-discount themselves, why loyalty keeps costing more than it returns, and how the market for permission quietly converts human beings into inventory. Without that piece, a man can see the loud fool clearly and still hand him his spine at the very next opportunity, because he can read the stage but not the price on his own forehead. Put the two videos together and the whole architecture locks into place. And here is the last revelation, the one that closes every loop this video opened. Weak men do not worship loud fools because they love fools. They worship loud fools because fools simplify the map. Real life is ambiguous. Power is costly. Hierarchies are fluid. Human motives are mixed. Competence is often quiet. Wisdom is often delayed. But a loud fool arrives and redraws the whole world in primary colors. Winners and losers, alphas and sheep, kings and peasants, enemies and allies. The map is childish, but weak men adore childish maps because childish maps remove the burden of perception. And perception is the most expensive thing a man will ever purchase. Machiavelli would have called that useful for rulers and fatal for the ruled. The ruler benefits when the crowd thinks in theater. The ruled perish when they do. That is why subscribing to this channel is not a favor to the narrator. It is a line drawn by a man in the sand of his own life. A man who stops watching these diagnostics goes back to the choir by default, because the default setting of the culture is worship, and nothing neutral stays neutral for long inside a culture that pays in attention. Subscribe, or the eye goes back to sleep. The culture will keep offering loud men as templates and asking the weak to confuse disgust with immunity. Immunity is trained, sight is trained, weight is earned. Miss enough of these calibrations and a man slides back into the choir without noticing. And the most terrifying thing about sliding back is that the slide always feels, from inside, like coming home. Do not admire men who need volume to feel weight. Do not fear men who collapse when contradiction enters. Do not join choirs built by cowardice and labeled brotherhood. Do not hand a fool a spine because he made insecurity feel temporary. Do not let private intelligence become public irrelevance. The world does not remember men who were correct in their own kitchens. History records who organized force, who managed perception, who understood weakness well enough to root around loud men without becoming one. The weak worship loud fools because loud fools sell counterfeit strength at a discount. A strong man pays full price for the real thing. He pays in silence. He pays in self-command. He pays in loneliness during the years when noise would have been easier. He pays in standards that cost him applause. He pays in the slow, unwitnessed construction of an inner hierarchy that does not collapse when a clown pounds the table. Most men will not pay that price. That is why the fools stay fed. The choice is older than Athens, older than Rome, older than every court that ever wept for a favorite and celebrated his funeral the same week. The only thing new is that this time, a man heard it named. This is your cold awakening.